There was something magical about the idea of visiting Diana's hometown, my best friend from university. We had both recently graduated in biology, and this was the perfect opportunity to escape the chaos of the capital and immerse ourselves in a rural landscape. Diana had spoken so fondly of her hometown that I couldn't say no to her invitation. After spending the morning exploring her village, Diana suggested we visit her grandmother, who lived in a small house atop a hill, about an hour's walk from the village. We had a delightful afternoon at her house, helping her prepare lunch and soaking in her wisdom. Later, as the sun began painting the sky in shades of orange, we decided to explore the surroundings. Nature enveloped us. Tall, twisted trees lined the path, their branches forming shadowy arches overhead. The trail was covered in dry leaves that crunched beneath our feet. The air carried the earthy scent of damp soil and old wood, as if every corner of the place hid a secret. We had been walking for about 20 minutes when the landscape opened up. From the top of a hill we could see Diana's village, its white church standing out among the dark rooftops. Diana pointed out various landmarks, explaining interesting details about the area. Suddenly a raspy, sharp voice startled us from behind. "Are you going to keep walking?" someone asked. It was an old woman, tiny and hunched, whom we didn't recall seeing before. She wore a pink tracksuit, a knitted cap, and held a cane in her right hand. But what unsettled me most was her gaze. Dark, hollow eyes that seemed to pierce through us, devoid of any emotion. Diana, with a politeness that felt oddly out of place, smiled. "Yes, Ma'am, we're just exploring a little," she replied. The woman made a strange gesture with her cane, as if shooing us away, but said nothing more. Diana took my arm and we continued walking, though I couldn't help but glance over my shoulder. Something about that old woman felt off. "Who was that lady?" I whispered to Diana once we were out of earshot. "I have no idea," she replied, frowning. "I've never seen her before." Her answer sent a chill through me. How could she not know the woman in such a small place? I tried to dismiss it, thinking perhaps the woman was from another village. A few minutes later, we stopped to take in the view again. But then the old woman reappeared, slowly making her way toward us along the same path. Her steps were heavy, dragging, and the sound of her cane striking the ground echoed eerily in the stillness. "Are you going to keep walking?" she repeated in the same raspy voice. This time, Diana, clearly uneasy, shook her head. "No, Mum, we're heading back now." The old woman stared at her intently, unblinking, and then her expression shifted. For a moment, it seemed as if a shadow flickered across her face, distorting her features in the dim light of the setting sun. Without another word, she sidestepped us and continued down the path. Relieved, we decided to return, but before leaving I glanced back. And that's when I saw it. In her left hand, the one not holding the cane, she carried a stone. It was large and rough, too big for her thin, gnarled fingers to fully grip. "Diana!" I whispered, alarmed. "She's holding a stone!" Diana turned, and together we stared at the old woman. But to our horror, she was gone. The path was straight and open, with no curves or bushes where she could have disappeared. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. A surge of adrenaline coursed through us. Without saying a word, we quickened our pace, almost running back to Diana's grandmother's house. When we arrived, breathless, we recounted what had happened. "The woman with the cane?" her grandmother repeated, her face pale. "That woman doesn't live around here." "But who was she?" I insisted, still trembling. Her grandmother shook her head. "I don't know. That direction leads nowhere. My house is the last one before the wilderness." She rose from her chair and in a hushed voice warned us. Don't go out exploring when the sun is setting. There are things you don't understand, and it's better not to go looking for them. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the image of the old woman, her hollow gaze, and the stone in her hand. But what haunted me most was the sound of her cane echoing endlessly in my mind. We never returned to that path, and we never found out who or what that woman was. But sometimes, in my nightmares, I can still hear her slow, shuffling steps behind me. Who was that woman? And what would have happened if we had kept walking in that direction?